to arrest these flames so that you wouldn't be able to see it. And even on the exhaust around the engine, we developed methods so that you had to be directly behind the aircraft, pretty close, before you could see any blue flame. And from the side, or 45 degrees or anything from the side, you could not see any flame from the engine. So when we were doing the firing, I rode in and firing at night before we'd put the flame arresters on, and would shoot movies of the pilot in the instrument panel ahead of me, and it would totally destroy your night vision capability for quite a long period of time. And then after we developed the flame arrestor, you could do this and hardly notice that there was any flame at all from the muzzles of the guns. But you still got wrapped on the top of the head from the muzzle blast, because it was so close over your head that they were firing.
Now, the cameras that you used, was the technology there so that you didn't need additional light? You could film at night?
Well, we used, sometimes we had to use black and white films, and the films of those days were pretty slow compared to things that are available today. Even with the fastest lenses that were available, we still sometimes had to do what we called hypersensitize the films in order to speed up the films, and you had to then develop them within a certain period of time in order to take advantage of that. And so there was little tricks that you used to try to assist you in getting the data that you were looking for.
All aircraft, all Allied aircraft had to have those white and black stripes, and if they didn't have them, they got shot at. And it's interesting on this model that on one side they also have indicators of kills on Japanese aircraft. So maybe this particular plane served in Europe and then went east later. Sometimes that happened. And sometimes I understand they removed the top turret because of buffeting and would only go into action with the 420 millimeters in the belly. There is a wreck on Mount Cyclops in New Guinea that's been removed, P-61 mostly intact, and that's going to be restored. And the Chinese have a P-61 in their museum in mainland China that's in perfect condition. And of course our own Air Force Museum has one, but it's a rare, rare airplane.
I was in Beijing a number of years ago, I think 1986, and I tried to find this 61 in Beijing, but none of the people that I was able to contact knew what I was talking about, so I never got a chance. I wasn't there long enough to spend the time that it was going to take to go through all the interpretations and translations to get to the right people. So unfortunately I didn't get to see it. But as Pat had mentioned, that this aircraft that was found on a mountain at 7,000 foot altitude in New Guinea was retrieved with helicopters and whatever, brought down to sea level and crated up and was shipped back to this country, and they have it back at the Mid-Atlantic Air Museum, and they're doing a reconstruction back there, and I don't know whether they still are trying to do it, but their original intent was to try to get the aircraft back to a flyable condition. So it would be a horrendous job, because some of the aircraft's parts were kind of cannibalized by some of the natives and others around there. So I don't know exactly how much was lost in that fashion. It would have to be completely redone. I know that on some other reconstructions that we did here for the Norwegians on the N3PBs that we built, fortunately, my department, we had microfilmed all of the original drawings, and we were able to go and find those original microfilms on the N3 and use those to make new drawings to use to build the parts that were needed. So hopefully, and we sent back to the Mid-Atlantic copies of microfilms on the P-61 so that they would be able to do the same thing. So I haven't had a report lately on how they're doing back there, but it's going to take several years to do it. Yeah, John Myers, who was one of our head of our flight test department on the 61s for many years, and he donated a considerable amount of money to this, and with the hopes, and he told them that if they got it to flyable condition, he wanted to fly it. And I hope they do that, because John is still flying his own Citation executive jet, twin jet, and he flies around his ranch, I think, with a helicopter. So he's at 90, he's still pretty active.
Although it was designed originally to be a night fighter and was to pick up enemy aircraft by the radar, when they first deployed the airplane in the South Pacific, they found that flying at nighttime, they could pick up the target, but they weren't sure whether it was an enemy target or a friendly target. And I guess they almost shot down some friendly airplanes, and they decided that from then on it would require a visual identification before they could shoot down the airplane. So we put in front of the pilot a set of night binoculars, and they were like 7 by 50 night binoculars, and increased your night vision considerably. So the airplane could then sneak up on the enemy target, having identified it by radar. But then with the night binoculars, he could tell exactly what kind of airplane it was before he shot it down. So radar did slide back away to optical observation, and they couldn't rely on radar alone because you didn't really know what the target was.
One P-61 served in the 1950s, early 60s as a Borate bomber, and then 2 of the later model F-15 reporters were also modified for firefighting, fire attack aircraft. And regrettably, that's a high-risk kind of flying. All of those aircraft were eventually lost and destroyed in accidents. And one in the Fresno foothills, there's still bits and pieces of that airplane remaining.
This conversion from the P-61 to the F-15, well, it started out to be the XP-61E. They removed the top turret and modified the crew nacelle, and it carried 2 people, had one of the early full-blown bubble canopies, and it was going to be a long-range fighter escort for B-29s flying in the Pacific to Japan. And after we had redeveloped the airplane for that purpose, they found that the Japanese fighters' defense at home wasn't too good, and they really didn't need these escorts. And so we converted the XP-61E to an F-15, a photo recon airplane, and we had, I think it was 9 different camera combinations that we could use in the nose, from 40-inch vertical, trimetricon, which means from horizon to horizon, and forward oblique camera positions. And some of those airplanes, there were, I think, 15 or 24, I'm not sure of the number now, that were made into F-15s, and they did mapping in China. They mapped a lot of South America, and then they had Operation Thunderstorm out of Wright Field, studying the effects of thunderstorms and the cumulus nimbus clouds and the kind of winds and things that occurred in those. And I had the experience of riding one night in a flight up into a storm up north of Dayton, Ohio, and the aircraft were pretty heavily instrumented to measure all of the stresses and strains. We found that there was some pretty high velocity winds sucked up through the middle of these clouds as you see them with the boiling at the top. I think they've measured winds as high as 250 mile an hour velocities vertically. So if a commercial aircraft flew into one of these inadvertently, it could disintegrate the aircraft. So they were used for that because structurally they were a pretty strong airplane. It was called the Kodak Reporter, yes, Kodak Reporter. And I flew quite a number of flights and checking out the camera combinations and for other purposes on those F-15s.
With the parts we have here today, this is one way that we can learn a little bit about the past. And when we visit a site like this and touch these parts, you're touching the past. Time stopped here for this airplane in October of 1947 on the 21st day of that month.
Derry asked me sometimes to go along as the cabin commander, so to speak, to help these guys get out. So we had this one fella that was going to write an article for a magazine about parachuting, and he came out to go through. We'd hang him up in the hangar in the harness from the roof and inside the hangar, and show him what it was like and how to hang themselves in the harness, and we'd swing them back and forth and let him down to show him how to come in to land and one thing another. And so the day came that was going to do the jump. He showed up and he had a mustache, but his mustache was kind of blondish. So I had a camera. He wanted me to take some pictures of him. So he wanted to know if his mustache would show up. And I said, well, not too well. So he borrowed, Derry's daughter had some lipstick, and so he painted his mustache with lipstick so his mustache would show up. And then he wanted to take his camera with him when he jumped so he could take some pictures coming down. I told him, I said, you'll lose it. Well, we finally worked out a deal, and I took some shock cord and tied it down around his ankles and around his knees and fastened the camera so that the shock cord could only stretch up to about his chest. And I told him, I said, now you can't pull it up to your eye, but you can just point the camera. If you want to take looking up at the canopy, you can point it up and snap some pictures or point it to the ground. So we got him in the air and came around. We were going to drop him out at 3,000 feet. And I told him that when I tap him on the shoulder, you showed him, and we rehearsed, put your foot down on the entry ladder and put your foot down here, hold on to the door. When I tap you on the shoulder, just step like you're going to step out on the ground. Say your name 3 times, pull the ripcord, and wait to land. We came around at the first pass, ready to go, and tapped him on the shoulder. He didn't go. So I told the pilot, I said, pick up another 500 feet and come around again. So we came around and got him out there again, and I said, now are you ready to go this time? Yeah, I'm ready. So he came around. Well, he didn't go when I first tapped him, and I said, I'm going to tap you one more time, and you got to go or we're going to have to go around. So he turned loose of the door, he grabbed the ring, and I shoved him out the door, and I had a camera. I took a picture of him as he's going down, and the parachute flaps are opening, the pilot chute is coming out, and the pilot chute went back, and there was a strut on the horizontal. I think we were in a Stinson Reliant, and the pilot chute went over the strut, and it broke off the pilot chute. Fortunately, his canopy did eventually open, but was precarious as whether it was going to break the strut in the horizontal, you know. And all the way to the ground, he's running like he's on a bicycle. And he came in, fortunately, because he had not gone out when we told him to. He landed in Lima Bean Field, which was the other side of Sepulveda, which the field at that time ended at Sepulveda. He landed in this cultivated field in the Lima Beans, or he'd probably broken his feet, you know, because he was still running when he hit the ground. Well, it tore some ligaments up in his feet, so he, I understood he ended up having to take about 2 weeks off of work to heal up his pulled ligaments in his feet, you know. So.
If that were me, all you would hear is me begging and screaming for my life all the way down.
But the one pass, we passed and we saw the Hollywood Park racetrack down below, and then there was Inglewood Park Cemetery as we were making the turns. And he looked down and he said, you know, man's soul was not made to fly. And I thought, what kind of a kook have I got here? But, and when I was pointing out that this is Inglewood Park Cemetery, is when he said, you know, a man's soul was not made to fly.
It's incredible to have this kind of opportunity to relive some of these old things that occurred, part of this wonderful aviation history that we have here at the Hawthorne Airport, and we're